What's going on, MD? Dallas and I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach to this video in that we have basically compiled, I believe it's around 5 to 6 weeks of training clips focused on primarily just his back training, which was something that has been a focal point this off season, and how we're going about training. It's not just throwing things together, but kind of methodically working in different ways to improve his back, improve his strength, improve his work capacity, keep his output, his work output high, and that's kind of what this video is about. So just a different way to show you guys how we're making progress in the gym, and different phases of his training, how essentially we're doing a lot of the same lifts week in and week out. We might do them in a different order, and that's for a specific reason, or we might do them with a different type of rep execution. Sometimes we'll do dead stop off the floor. Sometimes we'll do pause, hanging pause and stretch. Sometimes we'll do more of a continuous motion, somewhat of a piston style motion. And when I say piston, like pistons in a car, continuously going up and down in a fluid range of motion. So there's a lot of different ways, and that we're emphasizing training, leading up to essentially a goal. Okay, so the goal that Dallas set coming off of the Olympia was he set some pretty high numbers for himself that he wanted to accomplish essentially throughout his career. And then we broke down those numbers that he wanted to accomplish on the bench, squat, and deadlift throughout his career, and into more marketable goals that we could attain this off season. So that that goal for this point of his off season, his preparation, was to deadlift over 800 pounds, and not just for the sake of deadlifting over 800 pounds, but with that type of weight being moved, it's going to show progress in terms of strength. And I, for one, am a believer that pure strength, in terms of deadlift strength, is going to show in a physique much more than a max on a bench press is going to show, and much more than a max on a squat is going to show. There's something to be said about pulling heavy weight off the ground, that really builds big backs. If you look throughout history, I don't know any deadlifter with a really strong pull that doesn't correlate to a denser look throughout his traps, rhomboids. So, this isn't, you might see this as somewhat of an ego lift. Dallas is an athlete. He's always been an athlete. So we like to put in strength goals within his progress as well. So that goal was to pull over 800 pounds. And this video is showing some of the training leading up to that pull. So sometimes we pull deadlifts at the beginning of the workout, and the reasoning for that is to have your strength be at its peak at that point. You're entering the workout fresh, starting your training fresh, and we pull when strength is at the highest. There's other points where we're purposely putting in deadlifts at the end of training, which is making me pull in a fatigue state. And not only are we pulling in a fatigue state, but I'll often do something where it's going to be a little bit more energy. There's going to be an energy deficit that's created through the pulling. So what you're seeing now, and this was a deadlift tricep that we did, where you're working with the strength curve. So each phase of the deadlift is going to get easier, but yet at the same time, you're going to be more and more fatigued, so it doesn't really feel easier. But if you were to pull a deadlift first, and then a mid-shin rack pull secondary, and then lastly pull above the knee, that is working with the strength curve. Working without the strength, on the opposite end of the strength curve would be doing this in reverse order, and then the deadlift would be very, very challenging. So doing things like this to really work on his, not only his strength, but also his work capacity, which is the ability to do more work over time. It's important to me to keep his cardiovascular strength in play, and not let that fade as his weight increases. So, as we've gone on through the off season, we've kept an emphasis on, rest times in between sets, and making sure that we can maintain, peak output throughout training without having to take 5-minute rests or, longer than that, just to kind of recoup your air. So that's a lot of what's been going into training. A lot of basic movements that we're just emphasizing in different points of the training cycle to make the most out of them, and just continue to improve upon the strength that he has within the goal of improving his back. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. A little bit of a different take on how we've been approaching training, and this is kind of how we've done training